Hey guys, just catching up on my reading. Anyway, so before I get this video going, I have a lot to talk about, but a few disclaimers before we get to the main event. Number one, there will definitely be spoilers ahead. So if you haven't seen all 3 hours and 25 minutes of Crisis on Infinite Earths, you might want to stop the video here. Also, I'm very well aware, in spite of the fact that I love this comic book, I'm very well aware that this comic is a clusterfuck. Alright? For those of you who haven't read it, it is very difficult to read, and the mythology in the story is very dense. There's so many characters, there's so much going on. I completely forgive any liberties that the creators of this crossover took with the source material. So, just to clear that up, anything that's different from the comic, I'm not gonna criticize. At least not too much, at least not in an entirely negative way. And to answer the question that is definitely in all your heads, where the hell did I get this poster? Amazon.com. There you go. But if there are some of you who just want a quick review, you just want my quick opinion on it, I will give it to you right now, just in case you don't want to hear me ramble for however long this video ends up being. Because, like I said, I have a lot to talk about. So if you just want to know what my overall opinion of Crisis on Infinite Earths CW crossover was, it was okay. No, it is not the best crossover that they've ever produced for this franchise. The best is still Crisis on Earth X. That is the golden standard. They even established that is the creator's opinion in this magazine that I was pretending to read for the opening of this video. And I 100% agree. But Crisis on Infinite Earths is most definitely the biggest and most ambitious crossover ever produced by any comic book based franchise, even the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you can quote me on that. Is it as good as Avengers Endgame? No, I'm not saying that, but it's definitely bigger and more elaborate and way more ambitious. And I don't think we can disagree on that. Anyway, so let's move on, let's get going. The ridiculous amount of cameos that there were in this crossover from people that played a significant role in the DC universe, including but not limited to Robert Wuhl from the Tim Burton Batman, Burt Ward from the 1960s Batman series,
Holy Crimson Skies of Death!
Will Wheaton, who voices Aqualad in Teen Titans, and of course his cameo is also a sly reference to Superman 2, Kevin Conroy, Batman from Batman the Animated Series, Tom Ellis, aka Lucifer, Tom Welling, Clark Kent from Smallville, and Ashley Scott, aka the Huntress from the Birds of Prey TV show from the 2000s. The Monitor, played by LaMonica Garrett, perfect, just perfect, exactly as he is in the comic. And he played it perfectly, and not only that, but he also played the Anti-Monitor, which he had to sit in the makeup chair for about 3 hours every day to get that makeup done. No complaints there. Pariah and Harbinger, regular. I would say regular. The one thing that I was very happy about their portrayal in this crossover was that they were played by two of the recurring actors. Namely, Audrey Marie Anderson, who plays Lila Michaels, and Tom Cavanaugh, who plays, of course, all the different versions of Harrison Wells. So that was cool. I'm glad that they were using the actors that they use regularly in the shows, and that they were giving them a little bit more to do. They were entrusting them with more in this crossover. However, the way the characters themselves were used in the crossover, it was just regular. With Harbinger just being there for exposition, and then Pariah's purpose and his use was very weird. In the comic, Pariah is responsible for setting the Anti-Monitor loose. So his penance for doing so is being present every time the Anti-Monitor is going to destroy another Earth. He witnesses it. So here it was very, very weird and hard to understand. There were a lot of elements in this crossover that reminded me of old school classic Doctor Who, where there were a lot of characters and things and plot devices that were just kooky, weird, surreal, and ambiguous, and they were just there. You either accepted them or you didn't. And then on top of that, that if they didn't resemble classic Doctor Who enough, they also had a major sequence that took place in a quarry, as most sequences from classic Doctor Who took place, and modern Doctor Who for that matter, and Power Rangers as well. Another major flaw that a lot of other fans have already been talking about, and I agree with, is that this crossover felt heavily padded. Like they were not prepared to fill the length of 5 full episodes with this story. They just didn't have enough story, and so they stretched out and filled it up as much as they could, so much so that this thing has more padding than a professional football player. And there were just a lot of sequences that we could have done without. Hell, most of the 4th chapter was mostly padding that really didn't need to be there in order to tell the story. I feel that if they would edit out all the extra padding and all the stuff that they really didn't need to tell the story, this thing would probably be about 2 hours long. Now, I could sit here and name you example after example after example as to why Crisis on Earth X is superior to this crossover, but I think one of the major reasons that I think a lot of people can understand a little bit better is that the action sequences in Crisis on Earth X were better. Why? Because they were fighting actual people. In this crossover, it was you kept seeing live action characters constantly fighting CG, just swinging their limbs at the air and making no impact whatsoever. In fact, anytime anybody, whether they were superhero or human, hit Shadow Demon, they just exploded in a cloud of smoke instantaneously. So it felt very plastic. It didn't feel like the characters were achieving anything during these action sequences. Even though they were shot very well and the special effects looked really cool, they just didn't quite have the impact of action sequences that we've seen in past crossovers or in past episodes of their individual shows for that matter. With that said, I did like the aesthetics of this crossover, and I did appreciate how so many things in it looked exactly the way they looked in the comics, namely the quantum towers, as well as a lot of the characters' costumes. A lot of people complained that the Harbinger's costume wasn't 100% accurate to the comic book version, that they gave her, long pants and, 2 long sleeves. Well, the fact of the matter is they shoot this show in Vancouver. It is freaking cold, and Audrey Marie Anderson deserves to be bundled up while she's out there acting her ass off to entertain us. So yeah, this season, Harbinger, Supergirl, everybody got pants. The big surprise of Crisis on Infinite Earths Chapter 1, of course, the big twist at the end was that Oliver Queen dies. And with 4 chapters left of Crisis, as well as 2 episodes left of Arrow's own show, no, I didn't believe that Oliver Queen was dead, not even for a second. And I mean, no disrespect to the actors who did a magnificent job acting during Oliver Queen's death scene, especially Stephen Amell, a guy who I've criticized endlessly for years for his acting, did a spectacular job. All those scenes, the scene before he died, as well as his actual death scene. But the problem is that because I had this knowledge of what was coming next, it just didn't hold any impact, and which makes it all the more problematic that they actually felt the need to have him die twice, which was weird. Once as Oliver Queen and once as the Spectre. So there you go. Very weird. Both scenes, again, the actors did a great job, but they didn't get any emotions out of me whatsoever because I knew there was more to come and that he's still in their contract to appear in more. So there you go. Was it a good end? It was okay. It was an okay end. I wish they would have saved his death for the final episode of Arrow, in my opinion, where you knew it was coming, but at the same time you knew that there wasn't anything else coming after that. But yeah, him dying only to be brought back, only to die again, it's the most Arrow thing that has happened this entire season of this franchise. Because, oh my god, the Arrow characters constantly die only to be brought back almost immediately. So one of the major questions that I get is who was my favorite character in this gigantic mess of insanity in this crossover that includes Kevin Conroy appearing live action as Batman for the first time ever, John Constantine, The Flash, Black Lightning, just one awesome favorite character of mine after the other, one after the other, one after the other. Who was my favorite? Who did I think was the best character in this whole gigantic 5-part crossover? And the answer to that, the MVP of Crisis on Infinite Earths, was Jon Cryer as Lex Luthor. Hands down the absolute best. Whatever he was given to do, he did it spectacularly and better than most of his co-stars. No offense, everybody was great. Even the baby was great. Whatever scene he was in, whatever moment, any time that he was in frame, he just made the scene better. Now, on the subject of Brandon Routh as Superman Prime, I would like to remind all of you that I was one of the major naysayers when it came to his portrayal of Superman in Superman Returns. Hated that movie. I busted it. It was one of the first movies I ever busted. The only reason I went to see it in theaters is because I had a free ticket. I had bought, I believe, the first season of Justice League on DVD, and it came with a free ticket to go see Superman Returns at theaters. I didn't want to see it, went to see it anyway because I had a free ticket and hated it even more in spite of the fact that I paid no money to see it. So when I heard that he was playing Superman again in this, I thought it would be a stupid cameo to that movie, and I really was not excited or interested in seeing it until I saw him in the costume, and I saw him that it was the costume that Superman wears in Kingdom Come. And I got it. I knew, oh my god, he's playing an older Superman, Superman Prime. And I saw the way he just looked in the costume, and he looked so much like Superman for the first time ever. He just needed to age and, bulk up a little bit. And I got excited. I was not a fan of Brandon Routh, but this franchise made me a fan of him, especially Legends of Tomorrow. And I saw him in that outfit, and I saw that poise, and I instantly just knew that he would be good at this. I just had this sense of confidence in him instantly just from seeing a picture, and he met my expectations beautifully. He did a good job, and this was a crossover where he was doing double duty. He was playing both Ray Palmer and Superman Prime, and there was no confusing one character for the other, even though they look exactly alike. He did a spectacular job of separating both performances and giving us two awesome characters that we were rooting for, to the point that I was sad to see him go, but he was replaced by my favorite character in this crossover, Lex Luthor, so it was like trading something good for something awesome. There's a lot of debate as to the quality of the portrayal of Kevin Conroy as Bruce Wayne live-action Batman in this. Some people were okay with it, some people really hated it. I personally was okay with it. The moment that I heard his voice from upstairs asking Luke what was going on, the nostalgia that hit me, it was so hard. It's so hard to describe. It was like a punch right to the heart when I heard his voice, and then he came down the stairs as Bruce Wayne, and he was recognized as Bruce Wayne by Kate Kane. So happy to see him do it. Was I upset that he turns out to be a bad guy? Not really. One thing that I know about Kevin Conroy is that he's an actor's actor, and he loves to play. He loves to do different stuff with his characters. He doesn't like to do the same thing over and over and over again. When he comes back to play Batman, it's with the promise that he's getting to do something new with the character that he hasn't been done before. And he got to do something different. He got to play an evil Batman. A Batman that just went in the wrong path. When I first saw him in his costume for this, which is his costume from Kingdom Come, I assumed he'd be from the same Earth as Superman Prime, and I assumed that, like, in that comic, he would have Batman mech suit or Batman super armor that he wears to join in the final battle and help the heroes fight the Anti-Monitor. And I thought, okay, well, that armor comes on and he becomes CG, so Kevin wouldn't have to physically get in there and fight and do anything. It's just, you know, the armor comes on, it's CG, he gets in there and he helps the other heroes. I thought, oh my god, this is going to be so cool. Then when he turns out to be evil, I thought, okay, well, the armor is still going to come on, but he's going to fight Supergirl. It's going to be like the fight scene from The Dark Knight Returns when the armored Batman fights Superman, but that again didn't happen, and instead, and this is the part that everybody complains about, he just gets pushed and he just trips into what I assume is a power generator, which was out in the middle of the Batcave, just out in the open, and that electrocutes him and kills him. Yeah, he didn't think to put a fence around that thing. He just trips and backs up into that thing and he's done. And it didn't even look like a very hard push. So yeah, I thought that was really, really lame the way evil Batman was dispatched. That could have been way better, but the rest of it I thought was really good, and his turn and his performance I thought were very solid. So which one was the best out of the cameo scenes? Hands down, Tom Welling's scene with Lex Luthor. I'm not embarrassed to admit that I am not a Smallville fan, never liked it. The little bit that I saw of it by accident, didn't like. Openly avoided it for as long as I could. So I was not looking forward to this cameo. I just thought, hey, it's Greg Berlanti, Mark Guggenheim going back to the roots. They produced Smallville. It was the beginning of their success with DC TV. I get it, I respect it, wasn't looking forward to it, but as far as I'm concerned, and I don't have a problem admitting to the fact that this was the best cameo scene. Hands down, Tom Welling opposite to John Cryer as Lex Luthor and him as Clark Kent. Just excellent interaction between the two. It was an absolute delight to see them together, so much so that I wouldn't mind seeing them in the future do something else, like bring back Smallville Clark Kent and have him do another scene with Lex Luthor, which is now impossible because we're officially in the post-crisis timeline, but again, wouldn't say no to it. Another major complaint that I have, in spite of the fact that the Anti-Monitor looked really cool and really well done as far as his visual aesthetic, he was just a cookie-cutter bad guy. There really wasn't much to him. He just wanted to destroy the multiverse, replace it with antimatter, blah, blah, blah. He literally was a plot device for the superheroes to get together and have all these amazing scenes together, which is not bad, but you know, this is a franchise that has so many great villains, you know, the Reverse Flash, Lex Luthor, right now Alice in Batwoman is such a fantastic villain, and then the biggest crossover ever, and they really couldn't give this character more depth or make it more interesting. He's just, again, cookie cutter bad guy, there to be the threat, the end, and there was no better visual metaphor for the lack of attention that the writers gave to this character than the way he was introduced in this crossover. The way you introduce your main villain is so important. Like, for example, Darth Vader in the original Star Wars, you know, this hole blows open in the wall of the Rebel ship, and Darth Vader steps through out of the smoke and looks around. It's amazing entrance. Thanos in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he's sitting in a chair with his back to the camera. He stands up and then he turns and smiles. And it stays with you. Such a cool, memorable entrance. The Anti-Monitor, lumbering down a hallway like Frankenstein's monster. All-powerful cosmic being, can be anywhere. He was hanging out in a hallway in what I'm pretty sure is Star Labs. What was he doing at Star Labs? Why did he teleport Harbinger there only to be all the way down that hallway to talk to her? It was so silly. It looked so cheap. It was just laughable. Ultimately, the Anti-Monitor in this was just a means to an end.
I am the Anti-Monitor.
Now, at the opposite end of the spectrum, as far as characters that were introduced through this crossover, character that was 100% great and a welcomed addition to this franchise was Ryan Choi, aka the second Atom. For those of you who don't know, he takes over as the Atom for Ray Palmer. Again, if I hate to break this news to you if you don't know, but Brandon Routh is due to leave the franchise. This will be his last season of Legends of Tomorrow, and he will pass the mantle of the Atom to Ryan Choi, played by Osric Chow. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And I hope that when he does receive the mantle of the Atom, that he is a proper Atom with just shrinking powers and not in an armored suit that flies around, which is so silly. But again, it is what it is. But what a fantastic choice to play this character. Such a likable, sweet guy, easy to like. He reminds me a lot of Grant Gustin. Like Grant Gustin, when they announced that he was going to play the Flash, I just saw a picture of him on the internet, and he looks so young, and I was like, ugh, this is going to be awful. But then I actually saw the episode of Arrow Season 2, The Scientist, which is his first appearance, just as Barry Allen, before he has powers, before he ever puts on the Flash suit. And the moment he walked into the scene, that's Barry Allen. He got me. I instantly loved him. And the same thing with Ryan Choi. The moment he shows up and the heroes want to recruit him to go on this amazing adventure, he's like, nope, I have to be with my family. It's like, I love this guy. So I can't wait to see more of him, and I can't wait to see what he's going to look like as the Atom. There were so many incentives for people to watch this crossover. It's like, oh, there's going to be this cameo and this other cameo, and we're going to be doing this for the first time, and we're adapting this comic. But I think one of the top 5 things that people were looking forward to the most, that got most people excited as far as hardcore fans of this franchise, was that they were officially adding Black Lightning to the Arrowverse proper. And I am in full agreement with everybody who was most excited about that. He is one of my all-time favorite comic book characters. So happy that he has his own show. Like everybody else, I've been wanting him to cross over with the other shows since the beginning. It didn't happen right away because they shoot Black Lightning in Atlanta and they shoot all the other DCW shows in Vancouver. So very difficult as far as scheduling and travel. But they made it happen for this crossover, and I really appreciated it. Even more so, I appreciated that they included this wonderful scene where it is Barry Allen, it's the Flash, the second hero to have his own show, to welcome him properly and shake his hand and welcome him to the larger Arrowverse. So just a lot of wonderful stuff, but this crossover itself was just pure dessert. It was an ice cream sundae, and Black Lightning was the sprinkles on that sundae. Now, while I had little to no emotional response to Oliver Queen dying twice, when we get to the middle of this big gigantic crossover, smack dab in the middle of chapter 3, right there in between everything, we have what I consider to be the most emotional moment in the entire crossover, and the most emotional moment for me personally as a fan, which was the death of the 90s Flash. Now, keep in mind that this is a year in fandom where we've seen some insanely emotional moments that have dragged the tears out of our face, from the season finale of Stranger Things Season 3, to Buzz and Woody parting ways on the Toy Story franchise, to Iron Man dying. But none of those moments got me more emotional, made me cry more than the death of this character. And what you have to understand is that everybody in fandom has the one thing that you love, and you feel like you're the only person that loves it. And thanks to the internet, we have a means to find other fans that love these things that we love. But the 90s Flash was one thing that, even with the internet, I always felt like I was the only one who loved this and appreciated this. I grew up loving superheroes, and often I didn't like television shows based on them. I thought they looked cheap and lame, and I know that by today's standard, the 90s Flash falls under those adjectives, but when I was a kid, that was the greatest show on television as far as I was concerned. I would come home every afternoon to watch that show, couldn't wait to see the next episode. To me, every episode was like a movie, like a 40-minute movie. And then on top of that, my parents were divorced at the time. I was living with my mom and stepdad, and from my point of view, John Wesley Shipp as the Flash was the closest thing that I had in my life at the time that was a father figure. So I had a very strong emotional connection to the show. And I would see my dad in the weekend, but as far as a day-to-day basis, as far as to have a male figure in my life that I looked up to and that taught me right from wrong, John Wesley Shipp as the Flash. Then on top of that, for many years in my preteens, I hated Marv Wolfman, the gentleman who wrote Crisis on Infinite Earths. To me, he was public enemy number one because he killed the Flash in that comic. He killed Barry Allen. So combine all of that together, and then we arrive at the present where I see this wonderful, iconic figure that I had such a sentimental attachment to, and I see him die in the way that traumatized me as a child that happened in the comic. It pulled so much emotion out of me that I couldn't bear it. I mean, I had to pause the DVR when I was watching it because I was just, it really got to me. It got to me hard. Especially right before 90s Flash gets on the cosmic treadmill to stop the antimatter cannon. He tells our Barry, he tells modern day Barry, that his wife, Tina, told him that it was her job to keep him running. Tina McGee being the Flash's romantic interest in that classic show, meaning that after the show, the show kept going, and they got married. And then he lost her. Used to tell him he lost her. He gets on the treadmill, and they play the theme song to the original show, and they show you a clip of them interacting, their last interaction in that series. Oh man, I'm fighting to hold the tears back right now just thinking about it. So if you're wondering what in the year of super emotional fanboy moments got the most emotion out of me, it was that, hands down, and it was achieved by this silly TV franchise with these silly, goofy characters in silly, goofy situations. Nothing made me cry harder. Nothing got me in my nostalgic, emotional, fanboy heart more than the death of the 90s Flash. So right after that, we move into the fourth chapter of the crossover, what a lot of people are calling the Eye of the Storm, the calm before the storm, before the big finish. And like I already said in this video, most of that episode is padding. It's just the characters traveling through the Speed Force, trying to get back together so they can travel to the dawn of time and face off against the Anti-Monitor one last time for their last shot to reboot the universe. So a lot of padding, a lot of fan service. Not much happened in those first two acts. Let me think. Anything important, anything memorable happened during the first two acts of this fourth chapter? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I almost forgot. Holy freaking shitballs, Ezra Miller as the Flash from the DCEU. Now, as most of you know, I have my issues with the DCEU. If you're a fan, that's fine. That's fine. Not criticizing you. I'm just not feeling it. I'm not feeling that franchise. I have blacklisted those movies. I openly try not to watch them, not to talk about them. With that said, when that moment happened and Barry goes into the Speed Force looking for his friends, and he gets lost and somehow ends up face to face with his movie counterpart. That moment made me lightheaded. Like, I felt like I was about to faint. Literally. Like, my fanboy brain couldn't fucking handle it. The only time that I felt like that before was one time where I was accidentally cut at work, and I bled a little bit, and I got lightheaded, and I was fine. It was a minor injury. They treated me. I was fine. Nothing bad happened. But the loss of blood is the only thing that made me physically feel the way this moment made me feel. I could not fucking handle it. My brain was about to explode. And luckily I was in a sitting position. If I had been standing, I would have fallen over. We never thought this was going to happen, ever. Every time the DCW shows reference the movies, it's always in a very joking way. Like in Legends of Tomorrow, when Brandon Routh, who played Superman, grew a mustache in reference to the fact that they had to CG Henry Cavill's mustache in Justice League. It always felt like a kind of snarky hazing on the TV show's behalf every time they referenced the movies. Hell, this crossover had a bit of a reference to Batman vs. Superman when Batwoman has the kryptonite and she faces off against Supergirl, and you think they're gonna fight, and she just hands over the kryptonite to Supergirl, and Supergirl's like, no, keep it, it's cool. They don't fight. So a lot of people took that as a kind of a jab at Batman vs. Superman, where they seemingly fight for no reason, as well as the evil Batman who was just paranoid of Superman and decided to fight him and killed him. A lot of people felt that those were mean jabs at that movie. So it's always felt like the DCW shows, they act like they know that they're superior, and they're not afraid to drag the movies through the mud. And this moment immediately let us know that that's not the case, that they're all inclusive, and that the movies are a part of this multiverse. They are. And then on top of that, this is meaningful because these two actors were the Flash at the same time. Grant Gustin was playing him on TV while Ezra Miller was playing him in the movies, in both Justice League and Suicide Squad. So they were the Flash at the same time. These two young actors were playing the character at the exact same time. You never thought they were going to be together in the same location at the same time, playing the same character, and they were. Then on top of that, their interaction was wonderful. So much so that I would love to see them again, admiring each other's costume. I love how the Flash got the name The Flash, how Ezra Miller was never called The Flash in the movies, and our Barry, the CW Barry, calls him The Flash, and he's like, oh, that's a great name. Just everything from start to finish, so much so that I didn't want it to end. It was the complete opposite of when the Flash appears to Bruce Wayne in Batman vs. Superman. He's like, oh, this is so stupid. This is such a terrible, shitty reference to Crisis on Infinite Earths. And this was the complete opposite. It was just such a wonderful surprise, such a delight. You didn't want it to end, but it had to end. Was there any reason for it? It was just completely random. It came out of nowhere. It just happened, but I loved it. I loved it. It was one of the most surprising moments out of this entire crossover. Now, I'm going to make one of my very bold proclamations. One of those bold proclamations that I am very famous for. In this moment, in this little tiny moment, the CW, Arrowverse, DCW franchise, whatever you want to call it, surpassed the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Why? Because Marvel Studios, thus far, as I am recording this, would never do this. They have a very tumultuous relationship with their sister company, with Marvel Entertainment, which is the company that produces their TV shows, namely Daredevil, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agent Carter, that sort of thing. And, you would never see characters from those shows pop up in the Marvel movies. At least not important characters. Like, I know a lot of you are probably jumping at the opportunity to let me know that James Darcy, who played Jarvis in Agent Carter, cameoed in Avengers Endgame. Well, that's great, but that's not a major character. That's not Daredevil, that's not Jessica Jones, that's not Iron Fist, that's not Luke Cage, okay? Most people didn't see Agent Carter. They didn't even notice that that was a reference to one of the TV shows. Now, a good reference would have been to have Matt Murdock, Daredevil, interact with Tony Stark, Iron Man. That would have been meaningful. Everybody would have gotten that. Everybody would have understood the gravity of that moment. Okay? Marvel Studios, for whatever fucking reason, refuses to pull the trigger on that. The DCW, Greg Berlanti, Mark Guggenheim, those guys, they most definitely did it. They got it done. They made this moment happen. They had their two biggest franchises interact in a wonderful moment that worked, in spite of its random and impromptu nature. So in this little moment, they achieved more than the biggest movie franchise right now. And we finally arrive at the final chapter, part 5, the big bombastic conclusion to Crisis on Infinite Earths. And very much accurate to the comic, the final chapter takes place. It's the first episode of this massive, big, ultra, 6-7 show franchise to take place in the what we comic book fans call the post-crisis universe. After the multiverse has been destroyed, a new universe is created with just one Earth, an Earth Prime that has all the characters and all the locations that you know from all the other comics, but on one Earth. And appropriately enough, one of the first people that our heroes run into is none other than the writer of Crisis on Infinite Earths himself, Marv Wolfman, who approaches Flash and Supergirl to get their autograph. The two characters that he killed in the comic. This comic, yeah, I have it. I'm a fan. So it was kind of a sweet, lovable apology for doing that, which is okay, by the way. It was the biggest crossover of the time. The heroes were going in against their biggest challenge ever. Somebody had to die, and for whatever reason, he chose the Flash and Supergirl, who, via extreme coincidence, are the stars of their own shows right now at the same time. So it was just a perfect moment. Like, the actual crisis ended, they survived, and Marv Wolfman comes up, and as a little wink and a nod and a little apology, he asks for their autograph. So happy you survived. May I please have your autograph now? And by the way, this is the best picture ever. 1, I need that picture. 2, I need Grant Gustin and Melissa Benoist to sign it. Yes.
Since forever?
A wonderful detail that I noticed is that towards the end, Flash and White Canary, Sarah Lance, started to take a little bit more charge, step forward, because Green Arrow was gone. The first superhero in the DCW universe, the reason we call it the Arrowverse, and the guy who would basically take charge in these situations. But more so, how Sarah became their impromptu leader the moment that he was gone. Loved it. Very symbolic, very beautiful. For those of you who haven't been watching from the beginning, very appropriate since she was the second superhero in the entire DCW universe. She was the second character we ever saw. She's been doing this longer than any character on the screen now that Oliver is gone. So, and not only that, but she's the leader of the Legends of Tomorrow. So it just made perfect sense. It felt natural, felt organic, and I loved it. So much so that if they form a certain group, a certain league of justice, I wouldn't mind it at all if she was the leader of that particular group. In the comics, when the Justice League of America run was coming to its end in the 2000s, when that run was coming to an end, they made Black Canary the chairman or chairwoman of the Justice League. Sadly, that was one of those many things in comics that they made a big deal out of. They introduced her as the new leader of the Justice League, and it went nowhere, and the comic was canceled. But oh my God, this would be such a great opportunity to do that correctly. Now, this leads me to the third moment that got some major emotions out of me. The first one being when the 90s Flash died. The second one being when Ezra Miller appeared as the movie Flash opposite to Grant Gustin. The third one is when Barry Allen unveils the Justice League table at the Hall of Justice. This moment was more meaningful than the entire horrible, shitty Zack Snyder Justice League movie. Fuck that movie, fuck that guy. That was awful. In this moment, they captured the spirit and essence of the Justice League better than that movie ever did through its entire run. And it's just one of those things that as a kid I always wanted to see in live action. I always wanted to see that table. I always wanted to see those characters gather around, take their seats, take their custom seats with their logos printed on the back, and join forces. And it was just, oh man, it's one of those moments that I wish I could take it and send it back in time to my 7-year-old self. It's like, look at this. Look at what you have to look forward to. And it was delightful, and the characters played it beautifully, and I feel that Chris Williams, Black Lightning, his reaction was my reaction. It was like, wow, just save the speech next time. You should have led with this, the table. So wonderful. The Flash, Martian Manhunter, Superman, 3 of the founding members there, sitting at that table for the first time. So, yeah, I couldn't have asked for a better moment to end Crisis on Infinite Earths, except they kind of ruined it a little bit when they kind of hinted at the fact that in this new post-Crisis Earth, Prime, Gleek the monkey exists from the Super Friends. If you don't know what that is, look it up, watch videos with that character, and make up your own opinion about it. Just tell you right now, I'm not a fan. To me, he's very much akin to K9 from Doctor Who, but not even that useful. He's just there. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, a few things before I close this out, this very long, elaborate video out. Number one, again, not the best crossover they've ever done, but I respect and admire their ambition. It was huge, and they pulled it off to their best of their abilities. No, it's not perfect, but as far as I'm concerned, this is 75% good, which is a better average than most, and definitely not their worst. It was a huge endeavor, and for the most part, they met most of my expectations as a hardcore, long-standing DC fan. With that said, I strongly feel that at least the next 2 crossovers should be simple, should be super simple, should focus on the 7 members of the Justice League, should focus on establishing the Justice League. In fact, I think the next one should either be based on the Justice League's adventure with the Appalachians, which is the story in which they decide to become the Justice League, call themselves the Justice League, or The Brave and the Bold, number 28, which is when the Justice League face off against Starro, which was the first appearance of the Justice League. One of those two, if not, maybe both. Maybe they can combine both. That's what I think. Just way smaller than this, way simpler, preferably focusing on those 7 characters that sat around that table. Now, why do I say the next 2 crossovers should be kept simple? Because if this franchise makes it to 2022, the fall of that year will be the 10th anniversary of the Arrowverse, of the DCW universe. And whatever crossover they do that year should be huge, should be spectacular to commemorate arriving as such a landmark, as such a huge anniversary for this franchise that nobody thought would last. Nobody thought would be a franchise. In the beginning, they just thought it was going to be Arrow. So what crossover should they do if they reach their 10-year anniversary? In my opinion, it should be Final Crisis. They faced Nazi doppelgangers, they faced the Anti-Monitor. I think officially the characters of the DCW universe are worthy of facing off against Darkseid. One small tiny disappointment that in no way alters the quality of this crossover was that there were some characters that they were hinting at were gonna be in this crossover that weren't. Namely, Dr. Destiny, Psycho Pirate, and John Diggle as Green Lantern. It would have been great to have seen those characters in this. Green Lantern is my favorite DC hero. Would have been wonderful to see John Diggle. David Ramsey, an actor that I really like from this franchise. You know, for the longest time I would watch Arrow just to see him because I like this character so much. Would have loved to have seen him become one of my favorite characters. But honestly, their absence in no way made this crossover bad. They already had, you know, over 3 dozen major characters involved in this, so you're not going to hear me complain about that. A lot of you want to know my opinion of the upcoming Superman series for the CW starring Tyler Hoechlin as Superman. I like him. I love the actress who plays Lois Lane. I definitely think that they deserve their own show. I love seeing them when they guest star in everybody else's shows. With that said, I want to reserve my opinion on that until I see a trailer and I see what the premise of the show is going to be. Right now, personally, I feel that the CW has enough superhero shows. Yes, the guy who loves superheroes admits that they already have enough. But we'll see. Who knows? If they might surprise me and they might show me something that might justify them adding another superhero show, but we don't know that yet, so again, I want to wait until I see a trailer. So, in 2 weeks, it'll be the final episode of Arrow. So after that, 2 weeks from now, I will post my final Arrow E-Rant on my Patreon page. My final thoughts on this series that I went from thinking, it's okay, to hating, to love-hating, to liking. One of the most weird relationships I've ever had with a TV show, and I will be giving you my final thoughts in 2 weeks on my Patreon page. Now, if you want to see that video or any of my bonus videos that are only available to my patrons, and you're not a patron, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/ERod and pledge $1. That's it. $1, you're helping me produce the Blockbuster Buster, keep that going, and in return you get bonus videos, including my final thoughts on Arrow and its final season. There you go. So thank you so much for listening to my ridiculous long-ass rant on this enormous crossover based on the franchise that I love the most. My first love as a fan from when I was 7 years old. The moment I was conscious enough to make my own decisions on what I like, the first thing I decided that I loved was DC Comics. This was my first event comic. And even though it's a clusterfuck, even though it's difficult to read, even though it's difficult to follow, it left such an impact in me that I've never forgotten its major moments. And I have to say that as a fan, it was an absolute pleasure to see some of those moments be recreated in live action on my TV by actors that I absolutely love, who belong to shows that I absolutely love. And I couldn't have asked for a better experience as a fan, as a long-standing fan. Thank you so much for your support because, as I always say, I could not do what I do without you.